Alright, what's up, Dragon Brood? Today's another lesson from Aggro U, because there's a lot of terminology that you may not know about in Magic, and honestly, you might be new or you might have played for a while, but I get a lot of comments from people who have watched just me or other creators and go, I don't really know what that means, or what's this term? So we're going to try to cover as many of the, we'll call them the more important terms, as we can, as quick as possible in this video. Right, so we're going to start with the easy one, which is just aggro, right? It's basically meaning you're playing some deck that's trying to win quickly, usually on the back of creatures. If you hear anybody say something about ally colors, it's usually the colors that appear next to each other on the color wheel. So white, blue, blue, black, black, red, red, green, green, white, right? If you look on the back of a Magic card, these different colors that you see here, it's kind of any of the ones that would be touching each other, those are going to be the ones that are your allied colors. Now, sometimes if you are playing an aggro deck, you're going to hear somebody talk about an alpha strike. That's going to be all the creatures getting in there to get the damage done and end the game. Here's a fun one. Sometimes you might hear somebody say bear, but we don't actually mean bear. It's referencing a grizzly bear. It's a 2-mana 2/2 creature. Generally, anything that's a 2-mana 2/2 with no real ability or just vanilla, we call those bears. Sometimes you'll hear the term bird, referring to birds of paradise or pretty much any small creature that taps to make mana, or bolt the bird even, which refers to generally old school Magic where you would play a lightning bolt to kill the birds of paradise. However, now it just means any 1 or 2 mana red damage spell that's getting rid of a turn 1 mana creature for the most part. Now, you do hear people refer to the battlefield as the board, but you might also hear somebody say board in. Well, what that means is it doesn't really have anything to do with the battlefield as much as it does your deck. That's usually when somebody's playing best of 3 and they're sideboarding cards in from their sideboard to their main deck. If you play booster draft or limited, any type of sealed play, you might hear the term bomb. They're not talking about an explosive of any kind. They're talking about usually some big rare or mythic that can dominate the game by itself. The term cantrip. This is a fun one because I think there's an argument over the etymology of this word, but generally it's derived from D&D or role-playing games. But in Magic, it means playing a spell that also lets you draw a card. And then we have a bunch of words that kind of go together. You have chump, chumper, and chump block. Now, chump and chumper are basically the same things, and those are going to be your 1/1s or 2/2s that aren't really doing anything, that end up just getting thrown in the way, or chump blocking a larger creature just to save your life total since the creature was kind of useless otherwise. You might hear somebody use the term clock during the course of a game. It's not really about time or time remaining as much as it is the turns remaining based on the damage on the battlefield. For instance, if your opponent's at 10 and you have a 5/5 creature that they can't block, they have a 2-turn clock. I think that one's actually pretty easy to understand in most cases, but figured I'd include it anyway. Color fixing or fixing is also really important to note here because this includes pretty much this whole pile of cards where you can either find mana of different colors that you might need or be able to filter mana from one color into another. This is really good and usually going to be referred to as stuff you're going to play in limited. So booster draft, sealed deck. Usually some cards that aren't that popular, but will help you cast your cards if you're playing a 2 or 3 color deck. This one doesn't feel as important, but I think it's worth including just so you can, I don't know, understand what you're reading or hearing sometimes. But you might hear players refer to a cycle of cards. This is usually just a grouping of cards that go together from within a certain set. So you might have in the set a bunch of cards that do a certain thing, but one appears in each color. So if you had a swamp cycling card, a mountain cycling card, a plain cycling card, and so on, that would be the cycling cycle. That's a weird example, but you get what I'm saying. There will be one in each color within the set that all use the same mechanic from within that set. If you're really new, you might be confused because I've seen this happen where people don't know the difference between Elder Dragon Highlander or EDH and competitive EDH or CEDH as it's abbreviated or Commander. They're actually all the same thing. It's just a matter of some being more competitive when you're talking about competitive EDH versus regular Commander or EDH. Just kind of changed over the years. Commander is a name that Wizards co-opted for the format, and Elder Dragon Highlander was kind of some slightly different rules from the origination of the format. So yeah, just one of those things. I've actually watched people talking about both and be confused if they didn't realize they were talking about the same format. So that's why I'm including it. Oh, time to bust out the magic card again. Where we were talking about friendly colors before, enemy colors. That's going to be the ones opposite each other on the card. So white is opposite black and red, and blue is opposite green and red. So kind of just look on the back of your card. The two colors opposite the color in the little circle on the back of your magic card, those are enemy colors. You hear the term fetch lands a lot. I feel like that's pretty straightforward, but basically any land that you sacrifice to go search another land out of your deck. Oh, here's one you might hear every once in a while. It's a little lesser used, but there's goldfishing or fish bowling. But basically it's saying your game was as effective as playing against a goldfish. Basically, if you're just drawing cards and testing out draws, you're goldfishing, right? There's no resistance as much as a goldfish would give you in its bowl. I don't know why way back when we chose goldfish to be the bad guy in that scenario, but that's just the term they use. So if you ever hear that, that's what it means. Kind of where we had the bear, we also have gray ogres. Gray ogre is a 3-mana 2/2 that doesn't do much of anything. So anything that's a 3-mana 2/2 vanilla, we call a gray ogre. You might also hear the term grinder. That's basically anybody that's trying to hit up all of the tournaments to qualify, all your local RCQs, showing up to the regional qualifiers the day before to play the last chance events or whatever. The super competitive players, I don't really want to use the term try hard because that's not necessarily, but I guess some of those people would fall into that same category. But if you ever hear the term grinder, that's what they're aiming for. It's the people that are going to all the tournaments and trying really hard to make it to the Pro Tour. And while we're at it, I might as well include a hill giant to go with our gray ogre and go with our bear. But if you can't guess the pattern here, it's a 4-mana 3/3 that's a vanilla do nothing. So if you see that, that's what we call a hill giant. This one's one you'll hear more among competitive players or at competitive events, but it's the intentional draw or the ID. Like, this is for people who generally late in the tournaments have an undefeated record or maybe one loss, but a record good enough to make the top 8 whether they won or lost their next round or two. At that point, the players will draw just to save themselves time and usually take a break, go get a snack, food, whatever, and be prepared for the top cut of the event. So if you ever hear people say, oh, we're just going to ID last round, it's usually just taking the draw so they can take a break and get ready for the top 8. I also just realized, I've said limited a few times earlier. Basically, that's all of the formats where you don't bring a deck to the event. Usually something where you're going to be booster drafting or playing sealed like you would for a pre-release, where you purchase a pack of cards, you put your deck together from the cards you're given, and then you're playing the event. Pretty much anything that has that type of format is going to fall under limited. Which, to be fair, I guess is the opposite of constructed, where you build your deck before the event, hence constructed, and you bring that to play the event with. And doesn't really matter how many cards or whatever, it's just, if you build the deck, constructed. If you don't build the deck, limited. Mana curve. This is one that you might not know if you're trying to build a deck for the first time and you hear people talk about it, but it's basically the number of cards you have at each mana cost in the deck. So, how many do you have at 1 mana, 2 mana, 3 mana, 4 mana, and 5+. Just to kind of understand the curve, if you will, of the deck, if you were to make a bell curve showing, how much you have at each cost, just to help you figure out sometimes how much land you need or ramp spells or whatever so you can cast all of your spells on time. You might also hear the term metagame. That's going to be for pretty much all of the competitive decks that you're likely to run into a tournament. You're never going to count for everything, but basically when you talk about the meta, that's like a shorthand of saying the top 8 to 10 decks you'd expect to run into in any tournament environment. Man lands is another fun one, and this one's kind of self-explanatory, but basically any land that you can turn into a creature because the land becomes a man. I mean, it's not really that creative, but it's what we call them, so it's on the list. I also don't know if we really need to include Mirror Match, but it's in my notes, and that's exactly what it sounds like. If you're paired up in a tournament with another deck that's the same, or mostly the same, let's say of your 75 cards, including sideboard, 69 plus are the same, that's effectively a mirror match. An old school one that some people hear me say on the channel, which people want to correct sometimes, is Mize. Basically, it's shorthand for might as well. It's kind of just like a phrase you use if you were to top deck the cards you needed, and you're like, Mize that one. And whatever, right? You can use it for a lot of things, but it generally is just, might as well, why not, right? Like, you're going to attack, Mize, let's see what happens. You don't hear it all that often. It's usually us old heads that use it. Oh, you might also hear the term ping or pinging. Like, this is one of those things where if you have a spell or ability that triggers and just deals like 1 damage, that's pinging your opponent. Not so much from attacking, but usually from an effect or ability going off for something. It's not all that popular, but there are a couple of decks that are running around at standard at any given time that might be a thing. So if you hear pinging, that's what it is. I feel like if you played for a while, you understand what ramping is, but if you're newer, you might not know. But basically, it's anything that lets you find extra mana so you can go get lands and put them on the battlefield, or any things that make you mana to make it easier for you to cast stuff ahead of time. So you might have something that costs 5 or 6 mana. So on turns 1, 2, or 3, you might be playing creatures that make mana or cards that go search out lands. So maybe you could play that 5 or 6 mana thing on turn 3 instead of waiting till turn 5 or 6. If you've been around for a while, you know what rotation is, but if you're a new player, especially if you're playing something like Standard, because that's the rotating format, Standard cards are legal for 3 years at a time. So the next rotation, by the time you're watching this, will be with the first set release of 2027. But every year, the first set of the year will signal the rotation and will drop off the oldest year worth of Magic cards. So you always have 3 years of Standard legal cards at any given time. I guess we could go ahead and include shock lands here. Basically, the lands that seem to get reprinted every 4 or 5 years, but they enter the battlefield and you get the choice of either having them enter the battlefield tapped or dealing 2 damage to you. Also goes with pain lands, which let you tap, but you have to take a point of damage every time you use them, hence the pain. So we have kind of shorthand for a lot of the lands, as we mentioned earlier with man lands, but they're kind of self-explanatory once you understand what one of them does. There's also the category of sweep, sweeper, board wipes, board clears. Everybody calls those something different, but they're all kind of self-explanatory. Basically, any spell that wipes out all of a thing, right? If it takes out all of the creatures or all the artifacts and enchantments or whatever, just clear the board of everything that's there. So a lot of times if you're watching my content, I might say sweeper because that's my preferred choice, but other people might say board clear. It's the same thing, just people use different terminologies for it. Oh, I guess another one, now that I'm thinking about it, to include in the sweeper board clear category would also be Wrath, because the first early one we all played with was Wrath of God, so that also gets shorthanded into that category as well. A trick or a combat trick, and that's basically any instant or interesting type of effect you can use during combat to surprise your opponent that they might not know. Something that's hidden information that you can take advantage of to take advantage of some type of combat situation and try to flip the advantage if you can. Another shorthand we like to use is the word tutor. So any card that would let you go search a specific type of card from your deck. So let's say you have a card that says go search your library for a black creature. We would call that a tutor. You're going into your deck to get that creature and put it into your hand, or sometimes onto the battlefield. But basically, any card that lets you search your deck for a specific type of card. It doesn't have to be specific, actually, for a card, actually. You might also see people refer to a win condition. That's basically how your deck's going to try to win. So if you have somebody ask you, well, what's your win condition in this deck? Because you're playing a lot of weird cards. They're usually asking, hey, which of these is going to be how you win? Other than, is your goal maybe to mill the opponent? Is it to pick them off with Planeswalker tokens? Wherever the case is. Just making it clear that this is your route to victory. There might be a little bit of confusion if you ever see people write about the different ways to cast spells in Magic. We'll shorthand the casting costs with letters, right? Because you can't just make a mana symbol quickly. So if something costs white in 3, for example, we would have that as 3W. Or, if it costs 3 and a blue, it'd be 3U. And people have asked, why do you use blue to be U? But that's because black alphabetically comes first, BLA versus BLU. So black gets to be B, and then the first different letter is U that gets to be blue. Green is obviously G, and red is R. So kind of easy to keep them separated once you know what they are, but it's good shorthand. So if somebody says I'm playing a blue-white deck, they might just put WU deck, and you kind of understand what they're talking about. It's not woo like the Wu-Tang Clan, though that would be awesome. Okay, that's it. I think we covered all the major terms. If there's anything else that y'all think I should have included, let me know down in the comments. But if y'all want me to get into the nitty-gritty and get into more specific comments, we can do a part 2 and include even more. But hopefully these types of videos are helpful. Remember to like, subscribe, do all the fun stuff. That's all I have to do for now. We'll see you next time.